Hey, it's Irreverent Aegis here, and in this video I want to walk you through how to get the Bonecaller's Bane Trifecta achievement. That's the hard mode, the speedrun, and the no death, all in one in Veteran Unhallowed Grave. This video guide highlights a 3 DPS high burn strategy, so if you plan on bringing a healer with you, or if you have 3 DPS who aren't as hard hitting as my group, then I recommend finding a different Bonecaller's Bane video guide. Because we're not utilizing a healer, we're actually going to do all 3 of the side bosses and grab all of the buffs. Now that's a lot harder to do with a healer because your burn is a lot slower and there's a 30-minute time constraint. So with 3 DPS, we're able to get through this entire achievement in 24 minutes, leaving us a whopping 6 minutes to spare. So again, this is going to be your best option for survivability and for extra damage to do the 3 side bosses if you're going with the 3 DPS high burn strategy. For the first side boss, all we do is push his health in the beginning until we need to grapple off to the safe platform. When we come back, we drop all of our ultimates, and we ignore all of the growing AoEs. All you need to do is block them. If you don't block them, they knock you off the cliff and kill you. But if you block them, they don't knock you as far, and we don't need to worry about them for very long because the boss dies very early on. The first main boss, Hagrim the Howler, is also trivialized with a high burn strategy. There are skeletal werewolves, so the tank will need to pick those up as they can one-shot your DPS with their heavy attack leaps. Normally in this fight there's also a totem mechanic that shoots out AoEs that the DPS normally need to burn down. However, with 3 DPS, you pretty much ignore that. When Hagrim teleports and summons the Flesh Atro, then you pretty much can just burn that down as well. In fact, we're going to kill it before it even drops the massive AoE on the ground. When Hagrim teleports the second time to release the second Flesh Atro, it's just rinse and repeat. Just run over there and kill things, and kill them quickly. No need to worry about any extra mechanics when everything dies very rapidly. Of course, after that, when Hagrim turns into a giant werewolf behemoth, then the group just needs to watch out because Hagrim will charge across the map twice, and every time he charges, he's going to summon a few skeletons as well as 1 skeletal werewolf. So as the tank, you just need to find the skeletal werewolf and taunt it every time he charges. So on the second charge, again, I am just looking out for the skeletal werewolf, and that is the priority target to taunt. After I have aggro on both skeletal werewolves and refresh it on Hagrim, our DPS go to work by dropping their ultimate on him, and then shortly thereafter, he is going to die. Normally in my Trifecta guides, I like to give the gearing that I recommend on the tank. However, for here, as long as you're providing buffs for the group and are able to survive during the hard mode, it doesn't really matter which combinations you choose. So for most of this dungeon, I am actually wearing Yulnakrins as well as Arcasis. But I just as easily could have put on Saxeals and War Machine, I could have put on Arcasis and Drake's Rush, I could have used Yulnakrins and Olo. It doesn't really matter as long as I'm providing those buffs for my 3 DPS. All of them will get the job done. Now, for the hard mode, I did end up switching my gear to Perfected Yulnakrins and War Machine instead of Arcasis. And the reason why I went with that is because War Machine is going to give you a really big damage buff. And there are really just 2 main phases in that fight, and I wanted to be able to burn through the first one, allow my group to rebuild their ultimate, and then we can burn through the second one, and that's exactly how it worked. And I went with Perfected Yulnakrins instead of Saxeals, because 1, it does provide that very consistent minor courage, but 2, I actually wanted all of the extra health that Perfected Yulnakrins gives that Saxeals does not give, because that boss hits very hard. On the Keeper of the Kiln boss, the most important thing is that all 3 DPS know what direction they're going to go when this fire vent phase happens. And rather than actually hit the synergy, I just like to have all of my group members call out the number of lit up circles that they see, because it's much faster and a lot safer. And then I just drag the boss over to that area and he puts out the fire. So you'll see here, they all teleport up. Somebody's going to say what number that they see, and somebody said 2, so I just drag him over to the one with 2. Other than that, it's a matter of the tank holding the boss away from everybody, facing him away, and nobody doing anything stupid like running in front of the cleave. After this boss dies, we're going to do a couple of ad pulls, and then we're going to grapple our way over to the second side boss. The second side boss is one of my favorite side bosses, because you have to grapple in the middle of the fight, and it's really funny if somebody can't do that properly and fall to their death. Of course, that's only funny if you're not going for Bonecaller's Bane. Not that this boss fight is particularly challenging in the first place, but with 3 DPS, you could make it even easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to burn Voria until she teleports across to the other side. Then we're going to follow her over there, and once we follow her over there, we're not going to drop our ultimates immediately, but what we're going to do is we're going to wait for her to transform into a Bone Goliath. Once she transforms into a Bone Goliath, that's when we're going to drop all of our ultimates on her. Because when she's a Bone Goliath, she doesn't teleport again. So if we can kill her when she's in Bone Goliath form, we skip the extra teleport mechanic. You'll see here she starts her transformation, and that's when all of us drop our ultimates. And you can watch that last 2 million health of hers just start dropping very rapidly. So now, normally when she teleports at a percentage, she can't because she's in Bone Goliath form. So, we obviously need to teleport back anyway, because we need to grab our buff and take the portal, but we don't need to do it in the middle of a fight. The third main boss here is called the Eternal Aegis, and while I like his name, because clearly they named this boss after me, this boss is definitely not eternal, as he dies very rapidly, and it is very trivial what you need to do to survive this fight and kill him. So as long as everyone hard stacks, when all of these extra dudes are summoned, we just stand in the middle of all of their spinning circles, and they go down very quickly. Now, it is possible that people get pushed around as these things are summoned, so if they get pushed around, and they can't get back into the middle of the circle, they can simply roll dodge out to avoid all of them. But for the most part, you should be able to stay inside all the circles as long as you maintain that hard stack. With 3 DPS, they all get burned down very rapidly, so you don't really need to worry about them existing for very long, and before you know it, the Eternal Aegis is not very eternal anymore. After we kill that guy, we have a couple of more trash pulls that don't pose much of a threat, and then we have what is my absolute favorite ad pull in the entire game. So I'm going to slow down the video and talk about it a little bit. In this cave, the ESO developers decided that they were going to put a single enemy in this hallway, this dwreCK brigand, and I like to make up a story about him. This guy was just minding his own business, he got assigned this hallway, and it was his last day on the job before retiring, and we just came through and beat the shit out of him and killed him. Poor dwreCK. On the fourth boss here, there's one thing that I like to point out, and it's not really that big of a deal if you don't do it this way, but I don't like to burn Ondegor too quickly. So I usually tell my group, don't drop any ultimates or anything, wait for the Bone Goliath to be summoned, and then single target the Bone Goliath down until it dies. And the reason why is that once you push Ondegor to a certain percentage, she is going to release the outside and you need to grapple out. And if you stay on the inside, you die. And what I don't like to do is have the Bone Goliath accidentally still be alive by the time we come back, because it makes getting the no death slightly harder. Not all that much harder, but why bother when you can just single target it down and be safe? Now that we're on the outside, the nice thing about having grabbed the side bosses is that my grapple does a ton of damage, so I can actually have some fun here rather than just stand there and do nothing. When we come back, it's very important that you let the tank come back first and pick up aggro, because Ondegor will light attack people and put a dot on them that can kill them. So to avoid an unnecessary death there, let the tank come back immediately, and then everyone else can come back like 1 or 2 seconds later. That way the tank has time to pick up aggro. After that, again, it's time to kill the Bone Goliath. What's really bad here is that the Bone Goliath is about to heavy attack me, and I had to stay behind that pillar long enough to not get hit by the stun that would kill me. So luckily I was able to do that. What we should have done again was slowly burn Ondegor, wait for the Bone Goliath, then single target the Bone Goliath. That way we didn't push phases. But again, I'm playing with 3 DPS who are very trigger happy, so of course that didn't happen. Once we get into the mechanic where she is protected by ghosts, the best thing to do is actually to just kill 3 of the ghosts, not 4 of the ghosts. She'll take enough damage when she's protected by 1 ghost where it's not worth killing it, because if you kill it, guess what? You have to go through another phase where you have to teleport to the outside, and then you come back and have to go through another phase where there are ghosts. So we don't bother with that. We just kill 3 of the ghosts, and then we burn her down from there. Now I literally don't need to do anything this entire time, so I'm going to choose now to reload my UI. Oh look, the boss is dead and I'm all alone. My entire team has abandoned me. Of course, they're waiting patiently by the third and final side boss, Voria's Masterpiece. Not much of a masterpiece if you ask me. He only has 5.1 million health, and for 3 solid DPS, this fight is going to take probably like 40 seconds or so. The only really important part here is when he does slam the ground, I pick up the Skeletal Ravager before he has the chance to inadvertently heavy attack someone who isn't paying attention. After that, I just turn the boss around, and we deal the last 2 million or so damage to it, and it dies. If we didn't have such high burn, then I would actually explain the other mechanics like grappling through the oozes, which is actually kind of fun. But we don't need to because the boss dies before that even becomes a factor. So we grab our third and final buff, which of course in this dungeon, if you are a Necromancer class, you get an even bigger buff than everyone else. So that third buff is extra nice for me as a Necro tank because I get even more health and I get even more damage mitigation, which on the hard mode actually goes quite a long way since the guy does hit really hard. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, I did change my gear for this fight to go with Ylnokrins and War Machine. I have a 500 alt right off the bat here, so the War Machine buff is going to be great for the entire team for 50 seconds. And then the other thing I did for my survivability, I front barred Necrotic Potency because that gives you an extra 3% damage mitigation. So now if you look at my front bar, I obviously have Major Resolve, I have my Damage Mitigation Ghost, and the extra 3% mitigation from Necrotic Potency. In addition, I do have the Psijic Ultimate slotted for the full uptime when I'm on my front bar of Minor Protection. Normally I don't recommend permablocking as the tank, but this guy, even his light attacks, all hit very hard, and you're going to need to keep your health topped off in this fight, because there's an unblockable attack that hits you for a ton of damage, and it's this hand job attack that he's about to do right here. Even if you're capped on resistances, that attack, if you have no other buffs up for damage mitigation, can hit you for over 45,000 damage. So make sure you have all your buffs up at all times and you keep your health topped off in order to avoid dying as the tank. So you'll notice that we pushed this boss very quickly to the mechanic. Normally, he can start that mechanic once you hit 80%, and we were actually able to push him all the way to 60% before the mechanic happened, which is fantastic. During the mechanic, if you have a Mag DK in your group, which I highly recommend, the Mag DK should be the person that grabs the giant skeleton, and you let the other DPS kill the small skeletons. The reason why is that the giant skeleton, if it reaches the empowering circle, regenerates up to 100% health and is a lot harder to kill. If you have a Mag DK, you can have chains as the spammable, and if you have chains as the spammable, all you need to do is lay down an eruption. Eruption is a 70% snare, so that skeleton is not going anywhere, and even if it manages to get close to the empowering circle, you're just going to chain it back. So the Mag DK is awesome for handling that mechanic there. At 50%, the boss summons the giant bone Goliath behind me, and that guy alternates between an Ice Breath and a Firebomb. The Firebomb is telegraphed. It looks at a person and then makes a sound, and then everyone just needs to roll dodge, or the person being targeted needs to roll dodge to avoid dying there. Now, the whole point of doing a high burn 3 DPS strategy was that we wanted to only have to do a single mechanic where he summoned the skeletons. And that's exactly what we had, because right here at 10%, I called out commit, which means that we're ignoring the mechanic and everybody is focused solely on the boss. That is, of course, until we get to our dwreCK moment of the day.